For today's lesson, we're going to talk about the order of operations. This is a skill that you were taught over at the middle school, so it's not brand new, but it is the beginning of our pre-algebra curriculum this year. Before we get started, grab a notebook and a pen or a pencil. You will need to take notes because as we go throughout this presentation, there will be problems for you to stop and try. Without those notes, you won't do well on those questions. Here we go. So what exactly are the order of operations? Mathematicians have established an order of operations to evaluate an expression involving more than one operation. So let's talk about why this is important. If we were in class right now and I gave you the following problem, 5 plus 2 times 3, some of you would solve it like this. You would do the 5 plus 2 first and get 7, and then multiply it by 3 and get 21. Others of you would have solved it doing the 2 times 3 first to get 6, and then you would have added on that 5 to get 11. So even though I gave you the same problem, some of you would have told me the answer was 21, and some of you would have told me the answer is 11. That's a problem. So this is why we all need to follow the order of operations. It's just a list of steps or rules that we need to follow, so we all arrive at one correct answer instead of arriving at two different answers that both appear to be correct. So let's go over what the order of operations are. We use an acronym called GEMS to help us remember the steps. The G stands for grouping symbols. Now, over at the middle school, you were probably taught PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, or something like that. You're in high school now, so while parentheses are an example of grouping symbols, there are other types of grouping symbols that you should be familiar with. You may also see brackets, absolute value bars, square roots, and fractions. All of those qualify as grouping symbols. The E still stands for exponents. Remember, an exponent is when you have a large number raised to a smaller number, something like 5 to the second power. The M stands for either multiply or divide. But the big key with this step is you need to do whatever you see first in order from left to right. And then we're going to talk about that a lot throughout this lesson. And then finally, the S stands for either subtract or add. Again, just like before, it has the same little caveat to it. It goes in order from left to right. So that's what GEMS stands for. If you haven't already, pause this video and write that down because you're going to need these steps for the remainder of this lesson. Let's go through some examples together. So before we get started, just off to the side of my screen, I'm going to rewrite that acronym because I'm going to refer to it several times. So problem A says 4 plus 15 divided by 3. I'm going to go through the steps of GEMS. G stands for grouping symbols. There are no grouping symbols in this problem. There's no parentheses, no brackets, nothing else going on. E stands for exponents. I also do not have any exponents in this problem. M stands for multiply or divide in order from left to right. So I start at the left-hand side, and I'm going to stop once I see either multiplication or division. Here I see division, so this 15 divided by 3 has to be done first. 15 divided by 3 just gives me 5. Everything that I didn't do yet, the part that I did not underline, I'm just going to drop that down. So I'm going to drop down that 4 and drop down that plus. The last step stands for subtract or add. Well, the only thing I have left is this addition, so I need to finish it off by doing 4 plus 5, and that just gives me 9. Let's do a more complicated problem. Problem B. So again, working through GEMS. G stands for grouping symbols. There are no grouping symbols inside this problem. E stands for exponents. There are also no exponents in this problem. M stands for multiply or divide. So start at the left, and the first thing I see here is this 1 times 2. 1 times 2 just gives me 2. Drop down everything that you did not underline. Okay, start back over at the left-hand side, and we're going to stop again next time you see multiplication or division. So the next piece I see is right here, 6 divided by 3. That gives me 2. Drop down everything that you did not underline. Now if I go to look again, there's no more multiplication or division, so that step is done. Final step, I need to either subtract or add, again in order from left to right. So starting from the left, I see subtraction first. 4 minus 2 just gives me 2. Drop down the part that we did not underline, so plus 2. And now I can finish it off. 2 plus 2 just gives me 4. All right, let's go through one more problem, and this is the most complicated problem on this page, problem C. So G stands for grouping symbols. In this problem, I have 2 sets of grouping symbols. I have these brackets here and these parentheses here. Anytime you have more than one grouping symbol, you want to do the innermost grouping symbol first, the ones that are closer together. So the parentheses are closer together than the brackets are. Therefore, we need to work inside the parentheses first. Inside the parentheses, it says 2 times 2. So I must do that first. That gives me 4. At this point, I can drop the parentheses, but everything else, including the brackets, need to be brought down. All right, parentheses are done. I still have another set of grouping symbols. I have these brackets here. So I must do what's inside the brackets next. 9 minus 4 gives me 5. At this point, I can drop the brackets, but I need to bring down the remainder of the problem. So I bring down that 10 and that division symbol. No more grouping symbols, so that's done. E stands for exponents. We have no exponents. M stands for multiply or divide. I do have division here, so let's finish the problem. 10 divided by 5 just gives me 2. Pause the video if you're not done writing yet, but otherwise I'm going to clear my screen and you're going to help me go through a few problems together. All right, checkpoint problems. So off to the side, I'm going to rewrite that acronym GEMS, and we're going to use that to help us solve these problems. Problem A, what should I do first? If I follow GEMS, the only thing I have here is addition and multiplication. And multiplication will always come before addition, so I must multiply first. 6 times 2 gives me 12. Drop down that plus 4. What do I do now? The only thing I have left is 4 plus 12, so that's easy. That just gives me 16. Let's do a harder problem. Problem B. What should I do first? GEMS tells me I need to look at the grouping symbols first, and I do have a grouping symbol here. I have these parentheses. Inside the parentheses, I see addition, so I must do that first. So what does this addition give me as an answer? 4 plus 1 gives me 5. So I write the 5. I'm going to bring down everything else. Now my problem says 6 times 5 minus 3. So I'm going to go back to GEMS and I'm going to keep going through. We did G for grouping symbols. Do I have any exponents in this problem? No, so I can cross off exponents. M stands for multiply or divide. Do I have any multiplication or division in this problem? Yes, I have multiplication. 6 times 5 just gives me 30. I'm going to bring down the minus 5, cross off multiplication. I only have one step left. I need to subtract or add, and I see subtraction here. What's my final answer? My final answer is 25. Let's move on to example 2. Example 2, evaluating variable expressions. The directions here are a little bit different. You are asked to evaluate the expression when x is equal to 3 and when y is equal to 6. And notice the three problems we have on this screen all have either x's or y's in them. So before we can evaluate, and evaluate's just a fancy way of saying solve, before we can solve, we're going to have to do some plugging in here. So for problem A, this says 3 times x to the second power plus 1. I'm going to rewrite the problem, but I'm going to take out the x and replace it with its value of 3. So this problem now says 3 times 3 squared plus 1. Now I'm going to use the acronym GEMS to help me solve that. G stands for grouping symbols. Yes, technically I have a grouping symbol here. I have these parentheses. But if I look inside the parentheses, I only have a 3. There's nothing more I can do to just the number 3. It's already simplified, so grouping symbols is done. E stands for exponents. I do have an exponent here. I have this 3 squared. Remember, 3 squared does not mean 3 times 2. That means 3 times 3. You take the base and multiply it by itself that many times. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. Bring down the remainder of the problem. Exponents are done. M stands for multiplication or division in order from left to right. So I say this 3 times 9 here. 3 times 9 gives me 27. Bring down the remainder of the problem. I don't see any other multiplication or division, so I can move on to the last step. S stands for subtract or add, and I do have addition here. 27 plus 1 just gives me 28. So you're still using GEMS to evaluate. The only difference was this very first step where you had to plug in a number. Let's try another one, problem B. So again, I'm going to rewrite the problem, but I'm going to take out the x. I'm going to look at the directions and plug in 3. And then I'm going to take out that y, look at the directions and plug in 6. Let's follow GEMS. G stands for grouping symbols. I do have some math going on inside these grouping symbols. So 3 plus 6 just gives me 9. Now normally I could drop the parentheses, but I'm going to need them here to tell me to multiply, so I'm going to leave them here. Grouping symbols are done. E stands for exponents. There are no exponents. M stands for multiply or divide, which I do have multiplication. 3 times 9 just gives me 27. One more problem. Problem C. Rewrite the problem. So this now says 5 times, take out y, plug in 6, minus, take out the x, plug in 3, squared. Follow GEMS. All right, grouping symbols. So if I look inside my grouping symbols, I do have this 6 minus 3 going on, so I need to do that first. 6 minus 3 just gives me 3. I'm going to drop everything else down, that exponent and that 5 out front. E stands for exponents, which we do have. We have 3 squared again. Remember, that means 3 times 3, which just gives me 9. I'm going to drop down that 5 that was out front. Exponents are done. M stands for multiply or divide, which I do have multiplication here. Oops. 9 times 5 just gives me 45. So far, so good. Pause your video if you still need to write. Otherwise, I'm going to clear my screen, and we're going to go over 2 problems together. All right, problem A. So I'm going to rewrite the problem. Notice my directions, the numbers have changed. So now I need to evaluate when x is equal to 4 and when y is equal to 5. So for problem A, I'm going to rewrite the problem. 2 times, what number should I plug in for x? I should plug in 4. Squared minus 5. Okay, we're going to use GEMS to help us solve this. What should I do first? Remember, even though G stands for grouping symbols, and there are grouping symbols here, the 4 is already simplified. So actually the first step is going to be to do the exponent. 4 to the second power. What is 4 to the second power? 4 to the second power means 4 times 4. That gives me 16. Drop down the remainder of the problem. What's the next step? Good, I need to multiply. So 2 times 16 gives me 32. Bring down that minus 5. One more step. What's my final answer? Final answer is 27. One more problem. Problem B. Let's rewrite. I'm going to take out the y and replace it with what? 5 parenthesis 19 minus, what should I replace x with? 4 squared. What should I do first? If you follow GEMS, G stands for grouping symbols, which I do have grouping symbols, so I need to work inside the parentheses first. Now, inside the parentheses, I have two different operations. I have subtraction, and I have this exponent. Which one should be done first? The exponent. So 4 to the second power means 4 times 4, which is 16. I'm going to drop down the remainder of the problem. What do I do next? We still have a grouping symbol, so we have to work inside of it. 19 minus 16 gives me 3. Drop down that 5. Okay, only one thing left. What's my final answer? 5 times 3 gives me 15.